While the natural hair movement is empowering, it still has a long way to go before we are able to really truly be free in terms of our hair choices.
Popular phrase in Jamaica goes, nothing black, no good. There's nothing black is good, which means that we have been brought up to internalize negative attitudes to our body, to our hair, to our skin.
You trying to force a black person to consistently wear an afro is you trying to make them act white.
Okay, today's episode is on black hair. Do we really support natural hair? Look, I understand. I'm a black guy with locks that needs a retwist. It could come across antagonistic, forgive me. It can come across like an attack. That is not what this episode is trying to do at all. This episode is to build a bridge, to understand the journey, how we got to the promotion of natural hair. Are we really promoting natural hair? Why are we still debating whether natural hair is a good thing? Why are some policies still in place? Or how some people govern, how some industries govern black bodies, specifically black hair? We're going to be exploring all of that and more, and I can assure you that I will do my best for it to not sound like an attack, because that is not where I'm coming from at all. But without further ado, let's explore. Before we get into the episode, can you do me one quick massive favor? Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. In order for the channel to grow, it's going to need your support. It's going to need your engagement. So if you enjoy what you saw, like, subscribe. It's all important. Also, put into the comments anything you want to say, whether you want to disagree, agree. I'm cool with it. Go with it, but engage with the channel. It helps the channel a lot and boosts me up the algorithm. However, without further ado, let's get into the episode.
From very early, you realize that your hair is either good or bad. And often it's compared to people close to you, like your mother or your sister. For African American women, when their hair is closer to Caucasian beauty standards, they're often considered to have good hair.
So like I said earlier, this episode is not to be an attack. It's supposed to be like a journey, an exploration into ideas and how we got here, and hopefully build some sort of bridge to the next step forward. It's ambitious, but I'm going to try my best. I'm not going to do a full depiction of the history of black hair. I think that's too dense. I don't think that's my expertise. I don't know that much about hair. I say 4C, C4 sometimes by accident. So forgive me. However, I will be exploring how we got here, and you have to look at black hair and its pre-colonial roots, its pre-transatlantic slave trade roots. Black hair at that time was a status. It was an expression of freedom. It was an expression of class. It was an expression of marital status.
Before slavery, black women wore all kinds of beautiful and elaborate hairstyles because they had the right oils, herbal treatments, styling combs, to manage their hair. In many traditional cultures, communal grooming was a social event. It gave women an opportunity to socialize and strengthen bonds between other women and their families.
I don't think it's any surprise to some people today, but black hair was more than just what you saw. It could mean something spiritually. It could mean the tribe you're from. Again, people to this day will still argue that black hair is still, and the hair that you carry, Afro-Caribbean hair, still has a significant root and represents something about you. But pre-colonial times, it was very intentional. It was very deliberate, as opposed to what it became more of a survival tool, a camouflaging tool, an acceptance tool is what it grew into becoming. And how did we get there? It was, sadly to bring it up again, the transatlantic slave trade. It's not just that black hair was cut off. It wasn't just that it was damaged through some of the products or survival tools, the oils that were used to try and preserve black hair during the slave trade and the colonial period. It's not just that really is the crux of the argument. Of course, that would have a deep psychological effect on people, the loss of identity, loss of creative freedom. It's the loss of the history through hairs. You can look at the policing of black bodies almost exclusively through black hair, how it was treated, what was seen as acceptable. Even at this period of time, hair types and textures were preferable to certain slave masters, house Negroes that were maybe lighter of tones. If they had a hair texture that was preferable or closer to European standards, they were given favorable treatments. And this deeply ingrains a stronger sense of Afro bad, European good. And it has, it's not even just its roots, it stems, it begins, its inception starts from the colonial slave trade era.
But the transatlantic slave traders shaved the heads of their captives, stripping them of their identity. For many enslaved people in the New World, their hair became a means of survival.
Having good hair meant that your hair was kind of good enough to allow you to be seen as human instead of animalistic. The hair was one of the few things that could be manipulated. So if you could make your hair look less African and make it look more European, then you might actually not have your child ripped out of your arms. You may not be beaten as badly. You may not be given such backbreaking work that will kill you before your 30th birthday. So literally from birth, Black mothers would try to straighten their children's hair, straighten their own hair, just to see if they would be seen with a little bit of humanity.
Hair went from not just being an expression, but a survival tool. Something to get by, something to be seen or to be made invisible. In an environment that was, to call it dangerous, is understating the fact of what that environment was. But it was no longer what it was. It was cut off from its legs. And you would presume, you would maybe even hope that things would change post-slave trade, post the abolishment of slavery. However, we all know that's not what happened.
Hair coverings were used in post-antebellum advertisements for products meant to stir nostalgia for the good old days of enslavement, like Aunt Jemima, which was founded in 1889. From the Reconstruction era onward, there was a burgeoning market of Black women desiring straight hair for styles like the Gibson Girl upsweep. Having such a hairstyle meant one had the time and resources to maintain it, which could translate to respectability. In the few Black publications of the early 20th century, like Half Century magazine and the Colored American magazine, Black women's hair was straightened, projecting an ideal and reflecting desire. Complained educator, activist, and feminist Nannie Helen Burroughs in 1904, "What every woman who straightens out needs is not her appearance changed, but her mind changed. If women would use half of the time they spend trying to get white to get better, the race would move forward." That was said in 1904? That sounds a little familiar to me.
Hair was still controlled. Black bodies were still controlled. Straight hair, professional, afro, unkept, untidy. Even the term locks, dreadlocks. The word dread refers to dread. It's dreadful. This has been reinforced and recontextualized by our own people have reinforced these stereotypes, not just by language, but behaviors, practices. This was again reinforced through legislation, schools, media, depictions of this. However, there was a little break in that period during the 60s.
Afros have been on the heads of a few Black people, mainly artists, trendsetters, and intellectuals, as early as the 1950s, with dancers like Katherine Dunham, Ruth Beckford, and Pearl Primus rocking them, as well as the rhythm and blues singer Odetta. In the 60s, the community as a whole was discarding the term Negro in favor for Black, which people were declaring much more frequently was beautiful. Every year from 1962 to 1972, on August 17th, Marcus Garvey Day, the Grandassa Naturally show featured Black women, all with natural hair and, even more importantly, dark skin. There was lots of controversy because we were protesting how, in Ebony magazine, you couldn't find an ebony girl, said Kwame Braithwaite, the creator, a first-generation Barbados-American photojournalist and activist who formalized Black as beautiful and helped destroy the term Negro. Jazz singer Abby Lincoln, another notable artist who rocked an afro early, was a collaborator on the Naturally shows along with other members of the African Jazz Art Society and studios. The Black is Beautiful campaign was needed. Scores of Black children like a young Assata Shakur were used to calling each other Black as an insult, hurling the term nappy and seeing afros as ugly and unkempt. She wrote, "We had never been exposed to any other point of view or any other standard of beauty. The sentiments of Marcus Garvey, Nannie Helen Burroughs, and others were revived and reverberated in the decade of Black Power. Initially, to many, wearing a natural meant making a conscious choice to make a political statement. But an afro was not necessarily seen as a natural hairstyle from the motherland by everyone, with the 1970 article quoting an annoyed Tanzanian government-owned newspaper editor who was upset that young African girls were sporting the hairstyle because it comes from Black America. He used Angela Davis's picture to illustrate his point, which reportedly upset Black Americans living in Tanzania at the time. This beautiful expression of Black American beauty was criticized as militant expression of defiance, a shallow trend, and also praised for both. Activist and scholar Angela Davis would complain about the afro devolving into trendiness in 1994, saying, "I'm remembered as a hairdo. It is humiliating because it reduces a politics of liberation to a politics of fashion."
The 60s and the 70s is a time of revolution, a time where Black rights, Black activism, civil rights came into power. So the afro natural look was pushed. It had a political statement. It said quite unequivocally rebellion. However, let's have it right. As anything that starts off as a revolution, a rebellion, what ends up happening? What ends up happening is it becomes commodified. It becomes, well, it does what capitalism does. It puts its tentacles in it and becomes a trend. It becomes a style. It becomes something that everyone is doing. And that doesn't just stop there. It also extends to how we even look and view that time, how people depict that period. The film Black Klansman, afros are typically sported by, in women's case, lighter toned women, mixed raced women. And that's not to say that they're any less Black than us. It is to say that there is a lack of acknowledgement of what and who carries this hair typically. And if you're not of a lighter shade, we're reinforcing that value again. But media depiction don't just stop there. They go to Girlfriends. Joan, one of the main characters in Girlfriends, done by Tracy Ellis Ross, who sported a more natural afro hair. In the episode, well, not the episode, sorry, the season, or what am I trying to say here?
You're a clown! Did y'all hear him?
The series, Sister Sister, if you know anything about 90s sitcom, you will know Sister Sister. The episode, season 2, episode 1, Hair Today, one of the sisters straightens their hair and gets preferable treatment. And it depicts that story of straightened hair is more favorable than Afrocentric hair, a more Afro look. And that, it doesn't just stop there. The episode, funny enough, ends on a weird note where one of the sisters says, essentially, people who parade and push this look are just jerks. And I understand that's limited to its time. I watched it on Nickelodeon, so I wonder if the true unpacking of that couldn't be done. There was still not as much critical thought put into hair and how it affects people. Well, clearly it was, but it wasn't allowed to be explored through that episode. And the reason I bring that up is that this debate has been going on for donkey.
You're gonna blow fire in your face, you fucking donkey!
And as I said, that depiction of what or who can sport afro hair, where it's acceptable and where it's not acceptable has been going on for eons. It's not a new subject, and it's good that it's being broached. It's good that we're in a time where that's being pushed back. As I said earlier, this conversation has been going on for eons, for years, decades in fact. And we've had these conversations in different fonts and different forms, and it always stems its roots in acceptability politics. What is acceptable and what is not?
And we don't even have the chance to be like, hold on, do we really need to do this hairstyle? Do we really need to push a different hairstyle every week, every month? Can we slow down?
However, through the media, through documentaries like Good Hair, different discussions online, things grew. Social media helped this conversation to be pushed forward. And on that topic of good hair by Chris Rock, why Chris Rock was doing a documentary on hair beats me, but maybe that was the only way it would have got commercialized. I don't know. That brought the conversation to how damaging some of these products were to black hair, how many of them weren't even tested on black hair. Some of the ethics behind the hair and the weaves that were brought in for wigs and weaves and extensions, the ethics behind that. But it was rooted in stereotypes. It was rooted in problematic conversations. Some of it was just clumsy wording from Chris Rock to give him the benefit of the doubt. Some of it was the stereotypes of the time. Again, that lighter depiction, I don't think was directly dealt with enough. Colorism is a big factor into this conversation, and hair texture. What kind of hair textures are seen as acceptable? There is a level of gender and how the genders depict this, and what hair is seen as acceptable. It's really what brought this episode to the forefront for me, where I was challenged on one of my opinions of someone who had an afro. I'm not going to put who had the afro there because I feel like that's not fair. But I was challenged and it brought this episode to light. But that second wave of natural hair, that second wave where it grew in the mainstream discourse, really brings into what is natural now. What do we depict as natural hair? Many looks that have been called natural aren't necessarily natural hair by the letter of the law, if you're asking me. And also with this second wave, there's been more black-owned hair products that have been more designed for us.
They've created a brand to take on the hair giants.
The problem when it comes to afro and curly hair is that you can often end up with people that don't really understand how black hair works, but will make products just because it's lucrative. So many of these products are not being trialed on real people with real afro hair as they're being made. They're being tested on chemically culled straight hair. So that means most of the products out there don't work that well. But it doesn't matter because the customers will keep buying it. And if they buy the first thing and it doesn't work, they'll buy the next thing, then the next thing, then the next thing.
Frustrated by the lack of products on offer, Rachel and Joycelyn started their own hair care company.
I was suffering from traction alopecia, which is hair breakage. I just made a hair oil that I used myself, gave extra to Rachel. It was like, this is great, let's start a business together. We made 50 hair oils at the time, sold them in a trade show, and some of the people who had bought the oil emailed us saying they wanted more. And that's when we realized that there are more people like us who are looking for good products for afro hair.
In 2021, they raised $1.2 million in seed funding and now sell in 27 different countries. Their popularity has been helped by a growing awareness of perhaps the most serious side effect of processing textured hair: the cost to women's health.
When I was perming my hair when I was a preteen and a teenager, you kind of knew that it probably wasn't safe. It didn't smell very good. We had scabbing and burning, so you knew it probably wasn't good. But when I started doing research, it was so much worse than I realized.
A study in 2019 by the National Institutes of Health found that African American women who regularly used chemical hair straighteners were around 30% more likely to get breast cancer than white women. And it's not just occasional treatments like relaxers or perms that are toxic, but also products used on a daily basis.
Juxtaposed to what was happening only a decade before. With the rise during COVID, with people having more time at home, this had a growing rise too. But also we have these periods where people, white celebrities, are commodifying our looks. Things that were once deemed unacceptable have become fashion trends. And it does sit in an uncomfortable place. Do you police who is allowed to have cane rows, locks, or things of that nature? Or do we allow more free flowing expression of just hair in general? Are we sort of, I guess it's the word, redirecting our aggression on individuals and not the system itself? I disagree that we are redirecting it, but you can tell that, especially the likes of the Kardashians, they're just commodifying our looks and moving on without having any true understanding of where this look came from and why some people would be triggered. But that commodification of black hair, black looks is nothing new. We start the trend and we often are demonized, criticized for starting the trend, and then it quickly gets taken over by white conglomerates or celebrities. And you find that as well with black hair products, that as they grow and get bigger, they are often taken over by white conglomerates or white-owned majority conglomerates, and they start to become less and less for the people that they were made for. Again, we are pushed to the side for the masses, and the masses only like it because it works for us. The irony in that. Like I said, what we deem as natural hair or seen as natural hair often, not always, often isn't natural, but there is a clear movement in the last, I would say 6 to 8 years, that natural hair is being pushed to the forefront. And it's good. It's better for the hair. It's better for self-identity, self-expression, and inner confidence. It is a good thing. But there needs to be a true understanding of what natural hair looks like, what you're told it looks like, and how difficult that journey is for some people. Again, this isn't just a style change for some people. It's an actualization. It's self-discovery. And at the same time, some people would like to express themselves a lot through their hair. So there should be a lot less judgment on who has natural hair and who doesn't.
While the natural hair movement is empowering, it still has a long way to go before we are able to really truly be free in terms of our hair choices. There's a lot involved still, even with my natural hair, to get it to the texture and the shape and the definition that is considered acceptable for me to go to work. When we can get to a place where Black women can also have a messy hair, don't care, whatever hairdo, and walk out the door and be okay and be considered professional, then we would have made a lot of progress.
This leads to another interesting but important point of the conversation, of the dialogue. And that's the double consciousness done by and mentioned, first of all, by Du Bois. Du Bois talks about the double consciousness, the two-ness that lives in Black people, to be both Black and American, a dual identity and a posing identity. And you can place it here with natural hair. Do we truly support natural hair? We see natural hair, and if you don't use it, if you don't have a natural look, we tell people to go natural and then criticize people for going natural, or don't understand how different hair textures look when they have certain looks. Looser, more acceptable looks are what is pushed more than not. It's changing, but it's still far too often on the forefront, and it lives in the culture, not just zeitgeist, but identity of what is acceptable. And until that's challenged more, because it is being challenged, we will have this dialogue continuing. And that duality is very important, because it's why some people choose to not express themselves and have a natural look. It's why some people say things like this.
You trying to force a Black person to consistently wear an afro is you trying to make them act white.
Please, I am begging you, show me the handcuffs that anybody put on you. There's no handcuffs, obviously.
Let people do what they want. No. Let Black women wear their hair however they please, because trying to tell a Black woman who solely wears wigs and has never worn her natural hair out that she may suffer from a certain level of self-hatred is like telling a white person that they're racist.
Yes, some of that conversation I think is harmful, hurtful, but it doesn't understand, to me, or some of the criticisms of that kind of conversation, doesn't understand how hair itself is a journey. How hair itself shouldn't be overly judged, especially, but not exclusively, in the Black context. When you understand that Black hair was policed, controlled, and destroyed, I would advise anyone who is very critical of whatever look you see a Black woman sporting, specifically Black women, but it's not limited to Black women, Black men too. Be very careful of your language and judgment towards those people. I feel like a teacher telling people off, but I'm just passionate, all right? I think we should be a bit more careful of how we discuss things and what looks and what we feel is acceptable. And what you find is far too often some looks are accepted and praised and other looks are tolerated. And sometimes that can be celebrity status, sometimes that can just be skin tone and hair texture status. And far too often I see my own gender, but not exclusively, do the same. So a lot of it is unconscious bias, some of which I have myself. So I am not criticizing or judging, I'm just saying I'm trying to bring this to the forefront. And like I said, this is back to the dual conscious of this discussion. Sometimes people are viewed as being too natural. Ooh, that's, whoa, what kind of afro is that? I'm not feeling that. And sometimes you're not natural enough. That dual conscious. And it's almost a question of identity. Are you Black enough? Have you accepted yourself enough? And that conversation lacks the understanding that this is a journey. Hate to repeat myself, but it's very important for this to hit home. And it really comes to the psychological warfare of slavery and what it did to not only our minds, but how we see ourselves, how we judge our own.
As a popular phrase in Jamaica goes, nothing black, no good. Nothing black is good, which means that we have been brought up to internalize negative attitudes to our body, to our hair, to our skin. It's really a part of a process of dehumanization in which black people were expected to reject their own identity and try to aspire to be white.
There's an internalized beauty standard, an internalized racism that lives within many in the black society. I'm not going to act like it doesn't have a part of itself in me too. Hence why I had a very visceral and very, I would say, wrong reaction to someone sporting a afro, because I just wasn't used to seeing an afro like that. And it's important that we get to a place where we understand that the natural looks different in everyone else. And if it doesn't fit your ideal standard, that doesn't mean it's not ideal. That doesn't mean don't have healthy hair. It just means understand that it's a very diverse and a spectrum of looks. And the psychological warfare sometimes limits what's seen as acceptable and tolerable, as I said earlier. But modern day, we find that we still have this policing going on, and often, but not limited to, it happens in majority black countries. You have the case in Jamaica, that in this article in The Guardian, that discusses how a kid was banned from going into school because of their hair being seen as unprofessional, unkept. This is happening in Jamaica, this happened in the UK, this happened in the US, in Louisiana, not too long ago.
It's been years and years and years and years and years of being told, of mainstream media reinforcing these ideas, books, movies, television, all of these things have told us over and over and over and over again, implicitly and explicitly, that black hair was inferior, that it was ugly, that it was uncivilized, that it was inappropriate for the boardroom, the classroom, corporate places. So that the fact that the discrimination still occurs, even in a black country or majority black country, it makes sense because we've all been indoctrinated by the same lies.
And the fact that we're still having this dialogue in 2026 shows that this conversation is still relevant to today. We have come leaps and bounds with this conversation to the point where I'm probably preaching to the choir. However, there's still a deeper conversation of how we've internalized some of the earlier messaging and programming of what we've seen as acceptable. Hence why in majority black countries, you're seeing still a pushback to this. Yes, they've come up with laws to ban this. In the UK specifically, it's seen as a hate crime and a racism crime. Well, racism is not a crime, but it's seen as a hate crime and seen as discrimination to tell someone to change their hair, essentially, especially with Afro-Caribbean hair. So you can see that we're coming full circle, but it's still controlled. It's still put in a space where it's seen as something that is acceptable for some, praised by some, tolerated by others. It's seen as beautiful, but again, filtered. And there's a deep psychological conflict, especially when you look that this is a lot of the cases of recent are happening in black majority countries. It really reminds me of the time where there was a time in many black homes that they would have a depiction of white Jesus, which just tells you, in my opinion, that there is a deep entrenchment of internalized racism. And when you see it in majority black countries, you realize how deep the psychological warfare was that happened during slavery. Slavery wasn't just control over our bodies, it was control over our minds and how we view ourselves when we look in the mirror, how we view each other when we walk past each other. This isn't just a movement. This isn't just a trend. This isn't something that we force. It's something that we unlearn. It's something that we grow and understand with each other. I try to be as open as I've ever been, probably could have been more open, with my own issues that I've had with what's ideally seen as a natural look. I've had my own issues. I've promoted looks that are natural, but they're natural in certain color tones and certain hair textures. I've never mocked anyone though. I have to admit that, but that's beside the point. The point is I myself have realized that there's a level of internalized, maybe racism, it might not be the word, but definitely programming, and definitely a level of internalized programming that questions what a natural look really looks like. And when I'm faced with it, and many people are faced with it, they can have a cause for pause. And this is to open up the dialogue to have a bigger and wider understanding of not just a natural look, but not just natural hair, but natural hair, natural looks, and understanding that this is not a judgment thing, this isn't a forced thing, this isn't a trend thing, this is a journey, and respect people's way along that journey.
But this conditioning is being undone by years of activism and now legislation, like in Anguilla, which became the first Caribbean island to introduce a national hair discrimination policy. And in 2023, Trinidad and Tobago became the second. Its Ministry of Education introduced a new hair code that allows students to wear locks, twists, plaits, afros, and cornrows.
So we are chipping away at that global culture that still seems to deify whiteness or an approximation to whiteness. It's a very big battle though. And even though we have educators, we have programming, we have the natural hair movement that's gone global. And even as we see, more Black and brown people, in prominent places in our, entertainment culture, they are the lightest version of Black and brown. They are the versions who have hair that more closely resembles European hair. We still are continuously shown that, beautiful is lighter skin, looser hair.
Well, that episode went way, way longer than I predicted. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your coming this far. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe if you like this episode. And this underneath my nose. I'm out.
Kaboom, niggas, it's the bomb right here. You bad credit motherfucker, shut up for 7 years. We cook it, we pack it, we move it, we stack it. We re-up, we flip it, we all acrobatics. You see us, yeah, we up, I know you mad at it. We fiends like they be, we all cash addicts. Dealers to the hookers, they bang this shit. We get it hand over fist like some sign language shit. Honestly, sometimes get tired of this shit, but it's hard to forget how they line up for this shit. It ain't just crack, nigga, everything's a track. I cook dope verses that serve hard rap. Hustle this hoopty music, you seen, son. I'm a money machine gun.
I'm never gonna look like Beyonce.